and the way the bills work in Washington State is you get 2 years to pass it. So it made it, and it gets to pick up the next year where it left off.
Hey, welcome to the Bag Seed Chronicles. This is Uncle Dig, your host, and today I will be interviewing Lukas Barfield of the Cannabis Corner fame. Also, there is no garden update today, as I still have not started my garden. We're hoping that I'll be able to start that garden mid-January, but there's some projects I gotta get done around the old homestead first. Okay, so let's get to that interview. Hey, welcome to the Bag Seed Chronicles, Lukas Barfield. Lukas is a cannabis home grower, activist, and educator, a disability advocate. He is the host of Cannabis Corner on 95.3 KTQA in Tacoma and 101.9 KTAH Radio Tacoma. He is also a freelance cannabis writer and can be read on the website Ganjapreneurs. Welcome to the Bag Seed Chronicles, Lukas.
Hey, thanks for that great welcome, Dig. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. I know we've been having a little bit of some snowy weather in the Northwest, but I understand that your grow is indoors, but we'll talk about that just in a minute. How is the weather up there?
Oh, we are snowed in, literally. My wife, her work said, don't come in today. And it actually has shut them down so much that they're actually getting paid to not come in today. The snow is so bad on the roads. We had snow over the weekend, and then we get all that cleared off, and then it had snow overnight. But it's going to get back to the rainy weather over the next week in Seattle, so it'll just become slush, and then it'll just be a big pain in the butt for like a week.
Oh yeah, I remember those. I used to be stationed out there. I understand that you do some activism for the plant in your local Democratic Party. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, I have been for a little while.
Now, at your local level, has there been that hesitance to accept cannabis as there has been on a larger state demographic and national demographic for the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I really feel like it is. Yeah, I started with the Democratic Party in '08. Kind of went to a caucus for Obama on a whim. Actually ended up getting to be a state delegate for Obama at the end of the process, and then kind of walked away with that. And then over the next couple of years, kind of was just in the Democratic Party, and I didn't really have a focus or anything. At that time, I was a teacher, so I was kind of into education, activism, and things like that. And I've always been into cannabis and drug activism. So anytime I would interact with politicians, I would ask them about cannabis legalization. But then in 2015, we had the medical system here in Washington State, and they shut it all down. Well, a lot of the key people in that fight were Democrats in the legislature, and a lot of those people were local here in the Democratic Party, who I had kind of been around and knew of. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to engage in this topic. So I started getting in front of meetings and saying, hey, let's not break the medical cannabis system. And it was just like silence, like you could drop a pin. I was really shocked going forward. And then when I would go down to Olympia and talk to local Democrats, I just was really shocked on, because I always just assumed it was a Democratic progressive issue, right? You got the drug war, you got the police is always, we know the racial disparities with the police and everything. So I always just assumed that cannabis was right in there with the Democratic platform, but it's not. And then now I formed this thing called the Cannabis Caucus in the Democratic Party here locally. And I have to be honest with you, I have not gotten really any help from the leadership. They forget to put my Zoom link in the emails and stuff. I was sending out home grow emails last year, and some guy jumped my bones for sending him an email. He didn't want to get cannabis emails. And I told him, hey, well, you're on the email list, buddy. You're going to get, you're a PCO, you're an elected official. So if you want to get off the list, then maybe don't sign up to do the job, is basically what I told him. really didn't like that. He actually turned.
They hate it when you make them like think about stuff.
Oh man, he actually turned me into the head of the Democratic Party here in the town, in the Pierce County, and then she called my LD head, and I know her in and out of Democratic politics. So she called me up, be like, "Hey, Luke, what'd you say to this guy?" And I was like, "Well," I told her, and then they kind of like had a talking to me. I was like, "Whatever." And so I've haven't really got a lot of positive feedback uh from cannabis on the local level, but there have been a couple things done here locally um, with cannabis don't have anything to do with me. So there have been some movement, but I just again I've been really surprised at the reluctancy within that Democratic Party to take on this issue.
I think a lot of progressives are very frustrated right now. Like I'm not a registered Democrat. I want to say that first and foremost, and I'm a weird kind of progressive, but not. Let's not talk about my politics. Let's talk about the politics of the Democratic Party for a moment. When it comes to weed, I think that it's one of those things that they rely on to turn their voter base out. But if they actually pass reform, they worry that they're going to get rid of it. We're also finding that a lot of these Democratic, party people are much more conservative than maybe even their base. So I think we're going to see a migration away from the Democratic Party as people look for better alternatives that aren't just blue dog Democrats. They're really centrists at this point. The way the window of acceptable political thought has moved in this country. But I wanted to talk because you were part of the effort to get Washington to allow home grow just this last year. Why do you think that failed? And where do you think we go from here?
Um, I think the most basic issue of why it failed is just because they just don't quite have enough support in Olympia to get it done. And I know that seems obvious, but like I was just saying, you just kind of are surprised that things don't move the way you think they would. I mean, Massachusetts has home grows, Vermont has home grows, California, Oregon, so many states have the home grows. And so to a lot of us, it's just common sense that we would. But then when you're down in Olympia and you're a legislator, you see things like the police saying don't do it. And then the prevention community, they're really big into coming out against home grows. They always say it's going to be more kids access. So it's just a lot of it's still sort of misinformation going on as far as cannabis in the legislature, but there has been a lot of progress. This first started out, they could not ever get it out past the committee. This past year, they made it all the way up through the appropriations committee. And we really thought it was going to go. And the way the bills work in Washington State is you get 2 years to pass it. So it made it, and it gets to pick up the next year where it left off. So it made it 2 committees in, and it made it to the appropriations committee in the House. Now we still have to get it through the Senate, but I think it might make it through the House this year. But if it doesn't pass all the way, then we got to start over next year again, just fresh again. So there has been a lot of work, and those guys have been working really hard. So I think that we might get it passed. But as far as just why it hasn't, I just think it's still the same old misinformation. We
Right.
had 2015, like I was talking about with the medical cannabis, there was such a big deal made of all these dispensaries everywhere. But this is what's so weird is, back when we first started doing this home grow, I had a friend of mine that was trying to get people to come out and testify. And people would tell her like, "Oh, we're not going to testify because we're outlaw growers anyway, so we're going to do this no matter what."
Right.
So that is still going on. You know
Oh,
what I
yeah.
mean? So that's what's so shocking about them not passing it, because they're like, "Oh, we don't want all these people growing weed out there, and we don't want all these kids getting access to weed." But the people that are going to do it are going to do it anyway. And it and
The people selling drugs to high schoolers are not the same people selling cannabis in the dispensary. People get real.
yeah, and it's not a home grow, and we keep trying to. They have this vision, and I've seen them talk about it where they're seeing like a home grow is like 15 foot tall weed plants in somebody's backyard. But we keep
Yeah,
trying to.
if you're a weed nerd, not everyone has the time or the energy to grow plants that big. That's not something that happens automatically. And I think that a lot of people overestimate the skill of the average cannabis cultivation. Also, as a local neighborhood grower, you don't want plants that tall because the people will come steal them.
Yeah, and that's what we kind of been trying to tell them. And one thing that worked really well for us last year is they got people to send in their 6-plant gardens because medical patients still can't grow. So
Right.
it is assumed that there are still people out here growing. So they had people send in their little 6-plant gardens, and we showed it to the legislature. We put it in like a slideshow. We're like, here, look at this. This is nothing. Like 6 plants indoors, unless you're vegging them out for like 2 months under 1,000-watt lights. It's just you're not really you can't sell any drugs off of that. You can't make any money because everything you get, you're gonna keep for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even if you like, let's say you grew like a little 6-plant garden, especially up there when you have trouble having the plants go to full term anyway due to environmental factors, so that's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. You got to deal with more mold up there. So let's say you have a high yielder, you're going to want to keep that, and even if you sell some of it, what are you going to sell, an ounce? Like, it's a drop in the bucket. It's not enough to worry about.
Yeah, with the
Now,
stores being legal and there's already enough underground growers out there. Nobody gonna pay you any money for your little 6-plant garden. I mean, your buddy gonna look at you like, what? You want to charge me for that? So it's not, it's just really not anything that it's still, they're still locked in this drug war mentality that everybody is a criminal out there just waiting to take advantage of the system.
right. And I wanted to change gears a little bit, and I wanted to talk about direct action, and more than direct action. Let's talk about civil disobedience. It's my opinion, and it's kind of the truth, the unvarnished truth, that in the United States, at least, when you light up that joint or eat an edible uh, or rub that tincture on your joint or whatever, you're thumbing your nose at the federal government. Do you think that's important to reemphasize for people, as some regions of the country have a less stringent, aggressive enforcement regime against cannabis?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to remind people of that and just tell them that every little piece of civil disobedience can lead to um, federal legalization or even state legalization. But I just want to, I think even more important than that is to say that everybody is participating in civil disobedience by using cannabis, but it really depends on your privilege and who you are and where you live on how that is received by society. So if you're in California sparking up a joint on a corner, you're a white guy, you probably nothing's going to happen. You're doing your civil disobedience happening there. If you're a black guy on that same corner, you might be a little more at risk. And if you're a black guy in Birmingham, Alabama, lighting up a joint on the corner, you're probably in a lot of risk. And then we
Oh,
can
well,
even,
if it doesn't matter what color you are in certain towns in the South. The minute they smell that skunk on you, they're going to beat your ass and take you to jail.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It kind of depends on where you're at and where you live on how that civil disobedience is received. And even after the civil disobedience, um, it kind of depends on what will happen to you within the system. And something I've kind of learned over the years is, for what is one person's civil disobedience is just somebody else's life. I mean, um, people of color, people on the lower end of the economic scale out there, the police are bearing down on them all the time. So
Right.
they're basically they just walk out their door, they're committing civil disobedience in a lot of ways. And I think that's what we need to remember when we are talking about consumption and doing civil disobedience, but reminding people that, yeah, you are breaking the law and you need to stand up a little more and let's get this fixed because it's not, it wouldn't take a whole lot for all this to get reversed and
No.
you might start getting busted again. So yeah, let's remind people that it's legal, it's civil disobedience, and it's not all about, and that's another thing the cannabis, modern kind of cannabis culture has kind of gotten away from, is that thumbing your nose at the system, and it's kind of becoming part of the system when it becomes all the tax dollars and everything kind of gets wrapped up into it, and then you get Wall Street and the capitalist brick coming into cannabis.
That's why you should grow your own tax-free cannabis if you're allowed and you've got the ass to handle the consequences.
Definitely. Yeah, grow your own if you can.
What are you excited about in the cannabis space these days? What's really exciting you that you're learning about or seeing in the culture, as it were, that's got you kind of excited?
Yeah, I think first is making me excited is just opening up of medical cannabis in the South. Alabama, my home state's got medical cannabis. My second home state, Florida, has medical cannabis. Where you're from, some down south is getting medical cannabis. And so just patients and people with disabilities having access to cannabis in the southern part of the United States is great because, as we both know, it's Cancer Alley down there. It's a lot of people don't have great diets. It's not the healthiest part of the country, so there's a lot of kind of sick folks around. So having access to medical cannabis, I think, is great. But what's really exciting me too is hemp, and I kind of kicking myself in the ass for not recognizing this before, but just sort of the value of hemp in construction and what is going to be happening with hemp construction coming up and hemp fabrics and all these different things. They like have hemp batteries, but even using hemp as like pre-rolls or people are using them to help them quit smoking. And we have all the CBG topicals and all the research coming out with all that. And so just what's going on with hemp, I think is exciting. Not the Delta 8 and not the synthetic Delta 9. I'm
Right.
not a fan of all that, but
And
just
neither am
natural
I.
hemp, just natural hemp, I think is some cutting edge stuff going on right now.
I think that's my opinion on Delta 8 and synthetically derived Delta 9 as well. I am extremely uncomfortable with stuff that isn't whole plant medicine and synthetics. I'm not comfortable with that. I think you're losing something in that process. And I think it's better for everyone long term, not to use those products if you can get the real thing. Now, if you're in a place where Delta 8's legal and you have stuff to worry about, you've got commitments, I get it. I'm not judging you for that, but I think it's better in the long term that we don't, as a culture, uh purchase those products, because they're not good for cannabis cultivators. They're not good for home grow laws. I don't even think they're necessarily maybe as safe as some of the natural products. And when I say natural, I just mean whole plant derivatives. I'm not saying that they're not using synthetic fertilizers in some of these whole plant grows, but I prefer whole plant medicine to not.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, a lot of these Delta 8s, like you test it, there's a mystery meat sort of piece of the Delta 8 uh, concoction to test something with a I forget what they call it, liquid chromatography. To test something with that, you have to set up protocols and everything, and all these different. So if the gas weighs this much or whatever it does, it's this molecule and all these things. But there's a whole piece of it that they don't even have the protocol set up to test what is in there. So, and what I really don't like about Delta 8 is just it's it is because of hemp, but there was an overproduction of hemp because THC is illegal. So many people jumped in on the hemp. You had a lot of people overproduce hemp, and the Delta 8 to me is just a way to bail out a bunch of people that it's a bailout for the system for people that overproduce hemp. But Dig, I don't think they really did overproduce hemp because they have so much CBD sitting around.
They did overproduce hemp. A lot of the hemp out here ends up rotting in the fields every season. They don't use it all.
Yeah, but if they really wanted to, they could start the quote unquote system. The medical community could embrace CBD a little more instead of opiates and a lot of these other things, and we could actually kind of flood the market with the CBD. So if they actually promoted CBD a little more and it wasn't, it kind of got into the society a little more, I think we might not be overproducing hemp. But in our current market state, they definitely overproduce hemp, and all this Delta 8 is just a way to kind of bail themselves out.
Right. And that makes sense. I think a lot of the Delta 8 probably comes from other places too, like China and stuff like that. I know they have some VAT issues sometimes when they're mixing supplements and stuff. I don't trust it as much as I might trust other stuff. Now, I understand you've been doing a grow for a long time now. but you're doing a perpetual grow right now. Um, for those who are listening that don't know what a perpetual grow, it means that he's got clones going and he's got plants and veg, and then he's got plants in the flowering cycle coming up to harvest. So how many plants do you have going at any one time in your perpetual grow right now?
Well, I keep within my 15 plant limit, so
Okay.
I stay within that limit. You might have to go over one because you got to clone it, but pretty soon one's going to come out of your flower, so you're always losing in it. Sometimes you'll have two come out at one time, so you're always dropping those numbers. So I stay within that 15.
So so how many like plants do you have in flower right now?
So I keep a 4 plant rotation in flower.
Okay. So what size pots are you using?
So I start out with well, to do the clones, it comes out just a clone with just the roots on it. I don't use rock wool or anything. I
Okay.
put that in the dirt. So you just start out with a little small like cutting pot, and then I move up to a 1 gallon pot. And then I go up to a 2 gallon pot. That's the biggest one I use.
Oh wow, so you're finishing in a 2 gallon pot.
Yeah, well, I did that because I went. What kind of got me going on this perpetual grow? I interviewed a guy that was doing it, and then I actually went and saw one up at Washington Bud Company. They do it. They do a harvest every 28 days.
Okay.
And they are producing massive rooms of cannabis with, I don't remember how much they said they get per plant, but so it's a commercial grow. So they're big plants. They're only using 3 gallon pots.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm not even anything near that. So 2 gallon would work. And rarely does my roots fill up my whole pot. So it's never any kind of problem. I mean, it does fill them up, but I've never had any kind of issue.
Are you
And
using oh, sorry.
I got these pots from a commercial grower who said that that's what he uses. And the idea is you don't want to overuse your soil. So you don't want to
Right.
put too much soil in there. You don't want it that's not necessary.
So like what are your yields out of that little 2 gallon like?
It's probably about 20 grams total per plant each time. And that's with flower, trim, and I probably get about a gram of keef off each one.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad. So just a little under an ounce.
Yeah, and it just kind of works like a conveyor belt. You always putting one in
Yeah.
as you're taking one out. I kind of decided the way I wanted to do it. Washington Bud Company, I think they harvest every 28 days or something like that. But
Yeah.
kind of the way mine's falling into place is I put a plant in on the 1st, and then I put one in on the 15th each
Okay.
month. And then the way the cycle works out is I'm taking one out on the 10th and the 25th of every month. So it kind of, there's like a week or two in there that I might have just 3 plants under the flower light waiting
Right.
for that. But I never jump the gun. And if I take one out on the 10th, then I wait to the 15th to put the new one in. I never jump the gun. I'm always keeping it on that same cycle. And it helps me because I don't have to deal with the calendar. I'm blind.
Right.
I can't read calendars. I don't know. I got these other mental problems where I cannot seem to keep track of time and calendars and things. So,
Well, I mean, I can really commiserate with you, Lucas, because people ask me like what I've got going on today. And I have to look at my calendar. So I imagine that if I could not see my calendar, I would become unmoored in the time continuum, as it were.
I think it must be the calendar, and I don't see watches or something. There's something about it, just time and date. And so trying to keep a 56-day cycle when you're putting a plan in on like the 6th, that's like, what? So I just put them on the 1st and the 15th, and they all kind of come out at the same time every month. So it actually has started working out good. The key is, if anybody's wanting to try it, the key is to have you a good build up of plants in your veg first. So you want to have like 10 plus over there in your veg. And then one of those is going in every 2 weeks into your tent.
Right.
But if you don't have a big backlog over there, then you'll run out. It won't work right, and you'll have to skip a time, and then you'll have to wait a month to take one out. So you really want to kind of have a backlog of clones and small vegetars ready to go.
Right.
Put them in there. That's kind of the key to it, I've learned.
So do you have a couple tents, or do you still have that room that's split into 2 sections?
I got a friend gave me a little tent. little tiny little thing. It's like 2 by 5 by 2, I think. It's real small.
Oh, it's like a 2x2 closet size tent.
Yep, it's closet size, tiny little thing.
Is that what you're flowering in?
Yep. And then the room is just a room with a table in it.
And then you've got your vegging plants on that table under a veg light.
Yeah, I use LEDs, and so that's kind of my problem too, where I get a low yield too. Is I use really low wattage LED vegging because I just I'm not invested enough into it to crank my power bill up super high, and so I just use some I think they're like 32-watt Fleet LEDs
Okay.
from Ace Hardware, but their 32-watt LED really comes out to about 100-watt regular bulb. So if you put 4 of those shining down, and I got like a blue one of those, and then I have like a just straight blue light. This is only blue, and then I have another light right now that's blue, red, and white coming out. It's a LED I got. It's like the first LED I ever got grow. I still have it. It's still going.
Cool. So that gives the listeners an idea on how long you can expect an LED light to last. I know that I have one that I've been growing with every winter now for about 3 seasons, and it's still fine. It's not powerful enough to flower under, but I use it to germinate seedlings. And how old is that light that you've got?
Well, I've been using off and on over the years, but I have these Fleet Electrics. They've been doing 18 on, 6 off for going on 4 years now.
Wow, nice.
I've never I've the only LEDs I've ever had go out are ones that I think is just faulty construction. That's why I quit buying the ones on eBay that somebody made down in California or somebody.
Yeah,
So I get the name brand,
right.
uh, something like from the hardware store. So I know that they've been tested and things like that.
Okay. So you've got a flower tent and then a veg room. Um, so for any home growers that are looking to get something like this started, um, that you recommend, I see you recommend having a large amount of plants vegging and then move them in, as you go to flower. What strains do you think work better for an indoor continuous method? Or is that really up to the end user, or do you have some recommendations?
That's really hard to say. Even a sativa plant, and if we say, let's say a sativa plants are the ones that grow tall and the indicas are the ones that grow short.
Right.
Even a sativa plant under my system, like I have a Jack Hare right now, 2 of them going, which everybody recognizes as a sativa, and they're fat little bushes, and they're
Yeah.
growing pretty good, but they're still bushy. So it doesn't necessarily matter. But I have a plant that I know that's an indica, and these things grow so slow. I don't I don't know if something's wrong with the cut. I mean, it comes out really strong. That's why I haven't got rid of it. But they really do grow into a little bush.
Right.
It takes forever. And so I have 2 going right now, and they're just barely growing. It just all depends. I don't think any strain's better than the other. Just depends on what you like, and a lot of times what you can get your hands on.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience before we get out of here?
Just try to contact your local officials if you're into cannabis, and just introduce yourself and see what's going on in your local area when it comes to cannabis, and get active with your state legislators and people to try and let's finish this cannabis legalization. It just kind of seems like we're not really stalled, but it it's hard to just be a consumer. Like when you were talking about earlier, it is an act of civil disobedience. Or people are still getting arrested. So the way cannabis became legal is everybody working together, all the cannabis people in the 80s and the 90s showing up and getting out there and getting active. So I think really just need to kind of stay active and work hard, and let's see if we can get cannabis finished legalization. Because I keep getting told by people like Derek Kilmer and people like Patty Murray's people and everybody in Washington. Oh yeah, cannabis is coming. Yeah, we're all for it, but it's not happening. So it's just they're not making it a priority. So we really need to. And look at the sales numbers. How many people are buying cannabis and using it? If everybody went and bought a joint and then called the congressman or congresswoman, congressperson, and we would maybe get some legalization going a little faster.
And I would tell people out there that like it when people grow stuff at home, like vegetables and stuff. In a lot of ways, a cannabis garden is a gateway drug to vegetable gardening. And so what you're seeing in a lot of places that legalize is you see people frequenting garden stores more frequently, and not just for cannabis growing supplies, just for gardening supplies. So I think that if you're one of these conservatives that complain about people don't know where their food comes from, well,
Mm.
a good way for them to learn is to grow a cannabis plant and then decide, wow, maybe I'd like to try a tomato.
Yeah.
Now, was there anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
Oh, yeah. Well, I am teaching a class at Tacoma Community College on radio and podcasting over the next 2 quarters. So if you want to learn how to do radio and podcasting, come take my class.
All right, everyone, that is Lukas Barfield. And this has been an excellent interview. Let's overgrow the world.
Thanks, Dig.
Thank you. The bumper music on this podcast was performed by Chadwick DeVilliers on ukulele. You can follow him on YouTube at Ukuleles Are Stupid or on Instagram at Chadwick Enterprises. You can follow me on Instagram at Uncle Dig.